Next up, we have the polar bear on the left and the grizzly, which is a subspecies of brown bear, on the right. This is clearly two different species, right? I mean, the polar bear, this is a specialist hunter that evolved to hunt ring seals and metabolize those fatty seals out on the Arctic ice sheets. Whereas the grizzly bear is considered a generalist. It can eat a wide variety of foods, from neonatal or newborn elk and caribou calves to spawning salmon to blueberries to the fatty larvae of army cutworm moths in Yellowstone National Park. Clearly different species, right? That said, the harsh reality within which we find ourselves is that the climate is rapidly changing because of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. Our climate is changing faster today than at any time throughout human history. Not recorded history, the history of our species over the past 300,000 years. And both species of bears, the polar bear and the grizzly bear, like so many species on our planet today, both of these species are now on the move. This is deemed a growler. A growler is a cross between a male grizzly and a female polar bear. The flip side of that is the pizzly, male polar bear, female grizzly. Both growlers and pizzlies are fertile hybrids that have now occurred both in captivity as well as the wild. The first documented instance of a successful polar grizzly bear hybridization in the wild occurred in 2006 when DNA testing revealed that a harvested bear had a polar bear mother and a grizzly bear father. Since that time, there have been at least 8 subsequent confirmed hybridization events. So these two lineages, historically, at least for the past 150,000 years, had been kept apart by ecological or habitat isolation. Again, the polar bear, a specialist hunter hunting on sea ice. The grizzly bear is making its living in the boreal forest. So they were kept apart. Yet, as the climate rapidly warms, grizzly bears are expanding their range northward, and desperate, starving polar bears along the southern edge of their distribution are forced to seek resources to the south. So, DNA evidence suggests that over the past few million years, that the polar bear and grizzly bear gene pools have split and come together again. The ancestral state was probably something akin to the brown bear, and polar bears splintered off several million years ago. They came back together again some 700,000 years ago, but as of 150,000 years ago, they were splitting again, at least until we started rapidly changing the climate. My point is this: if we strictly adhere to the textbook definition of the biological species concept, then technically polar bears and grizzly bears should now be considered the same species. Why? Because they interbreed in nature and they produce viable, fertile offspring. As Arctic sea ice is expected to completely disappear during the summer months of 2027, just a few years down the road, that'll be the first time since we've been monitoring sea ice that it's completely disappeared. As this happens, so is the habitat isolation of polar bears and grizzly bears. That isolation is disappearing as well. Take a moment, please check out the video below. It's fascinating. It's called Why Hybrid Animals May Take Over the North. But the reality is, if we don't change our behaviors and the climate continues to accelerate, the warming continues to continue to accelerate, the hybrid growler and pizzly may be what is to become of the polar bear species. Similarly, this is a liger. It's a hybrid produced from a male lion and female tiger, whereas a tigon is the reverse. So here's the thing: male ligers and tigons are indeed sterile, meaning, according to biological species concept, they should be two separate species, but female ligers and tigons are quite fertile. It's kind of a mess, right? It's not clear. So Asiatic lions and Siberian tigers are something in between two unique species. My broader point is that speciation is a continuous process as gene pools drift apart, sometimes completely separating into unique species, other times drifting back together again with still enough genetic similarity to still produce hybrids, as in the case of lions and tigers, hybrid females that are still fertile. So my point is, ultimately, we think of species as separate, discrete things: lions, tigers, and bears, oh my. But in reality, they haven't accumulated enough genetic differences to be reproductively incompatible. And before we move on from the topic of hybrids, I would be remiss if I didn't introduce you to Hercules. Hercules at 922 pounds. This liger is the world's largest living cat, bigger than both natural tigers and lions. It just goes to show you that hybrids aren't always inviolable, weak, and frail, but hybrids can actually be quite robust, quite vigorous, and healthy, and strong. Although I do not feel that bottle feeding a 900 plus pound cat may be a great idea for the long term.